Now for something special. The unit is self-contained with its own saddler, farrier, wheelwright and so on. It's a rigorous training dished out who know all there is to know about horses, and it brings results.
We take you behind the scenes now to show just some of the interesting aspects of this training.
Welcome to Equine Dynamics with Mike Stine, the best podcast to create sounder horses from the ground up. Mike Stine is a registered journeyman farrier with an APF1 accreditation, also the official farrier for the 2018 World Equestrian Games and the 2017 American Eventing Championship. On this week's show, we're going to talk about abscesses, causes, preventing, and managing, quarter cracks, and saddle interference with equine movements. And now, Mike Stine, how are you?
I'm doing good. How are you doing, Travis?
I'm doing well. Now, have you survived this storm that we've been going through? Now, those of you who don't know, we broadcast just outside of Charlotte, North Carolina, a beautiful little town we like to call Marshville. I think the population is about 2,500 people. And we did catch a little bit of that ice storm that's been coming through. So, Mike, did you survive this big ice storm, or did you lose power? Were you locked in your place and you couldn't get out?
Well, I've been snowed in for about a week. The storm's only been a day, but no big deal. Had a few light flickers.
So I have a question for you. Now, our horse, our main show horse, is away at day camp, or it's over getting trained for another 2 months at another facility, because our arena is an open arena, of course, with all the snow and rain and stuff. We really can't train the horse out there during this time. It gets kind of soupy out there. Here on the property, we have little ponies, and they're just lawn ornaments. My wife last night, because of the rain and snow and everything, she was worried about them not getting out of the rain or getting out of the snow and stuff. I said, well, leave the stalls open, because they have little paddocks they can run in and out of, and they'll go in the stall when it gets cold or wet, and then they, sure enough, no, they're out there in the rain, they're out there in the snow. Now, they're not clipped or anything, and they didn't have blankets on. Then we went out there later on to feed that evening, and we put the blankets on, we put the fleece blanket on, and the blanket's waterproof. Have you had experience as far as when should you blanket a horse, or, you know, is it too late to blanket a horse once a horse is wet? I don't understand the details. I'm a radio guy. I've said that before. My wife is the horse person. So, I mean, when should you blanket a horse, I guess?
That's going to, like everything else, it's going to vary a lot. We had horses out for years, and some of the horses, when we did have ice storms, would have ice in their mane, ice in their tail, and they seemed pretty okay. Other horses can't manage it that well. Horses that have been clipped, yes, you need to do something. And I think sometimes it's kind of like having a mutt dog or a hybrid dog, because coming up didn't have hybrid horses. And they lived outside, they lived in the elements, and they kind of had to toughen up. But if you got a horse that has grown up out of the weather during stuff like this, it's a little different deal for them. It's just like, you know, somebody that's been working outside in a northern environment as opposed to a southern environment. If you swap places, I'd freeze my tail off, and then you got people from up north coming down here, and they're cooking during the summer.
Well, that's me. I was born and raised in Florida, and when it gets cold outside, yeah, I'm not very good out there, so.
So it's going to vary. Ideally, it would be better if the horse was dry to put a blanket on.
So she put the fleece blanket on, and I'm thinking, don't we need to, like, towel dry them off like you would a dog when you give them a bath or anything? And she said, no, the fleece blanket would absorb the moisture out of the fur and stuff, and then the waterproof over the top. So that's what the horses are looking like right now. So I have a question for you, another question for you, Mike. Are you ready for this one?
Sure.
So we were talking here before we started the show, and I said, you know, worst case scenario, you know, we have the snow and the rain, and some of the pastures get kind of muddy and soupy. If our horses out there had shoes on them, and if one of the horses pulled a shoe, technically, could I put that shoe back on the horse? I mean, my example that I was giving to you was putting the cars back on the tire, or the tires back on the car. I mean, you're literally not really doing anything. You're just taking the shoe and putting it back in the same, not the same holes, but I mean, just putting the shoe back on the same way it came off. Can I physically do that?
Well, if the nail holes are solid enough and you understand what the nails are doing, it can be done. I've got one client that she's got her own anvil and everything, but she shoots horses also. And I've got several farriers I have done work for at times. But someone could learn to, for sure. You got to know how to manage the nails, because if you drive it wrong, well, your wife's not going to be very happy with you.
Could you teach me in like 30 minutes or less how to shoe a horse, or is it a little bit more complicated? Not to shoe a horse, but to put a shoe back on a horse. Could you teach me in less than 30 minutes?
I could teach you. It would probably take more than 30 minutes.
I'm a fast learner, Mike. You never know. Yeah? Okay.
Yeah, maybe. We'll give it a try. You want to.
Now, last week we were also talking about your little special tool that you got, and you brought it with you. And explain again what this little tool is that you brought, that you made, that, you know, you paid $1.49 when at the actual store for the actual tool is like $400 or something like that. Crazy.
Well, this was when I got where I could not get bone curettes so easy for dealing with.
There it is.
With white line problems.
Here, let me see it.
I modified the screwdriver.
Oh, yeah, it's just a little screwdriver.
It's a little cheapy screwdriver. I keep that in my apron. If I've got a place where I may have to find a void in the foot, I use that to scrape and probe the void along with a stiff wire brush and whatever else I might need.
Now, don't forget, for every podcast we do, we also have a matching video as well.
Right.
And the way you see that is go over to YouTube, click on Equine Dynamics or search for Equine Dynamics. Make sure you like and subscribe and do all that stuff. And you can see this tool that I have here in my hand in real time as we're talking about it.
Now, you kind of need to know what your anatomy is and the way that tool is shaped. You work away from as you go down behind the wall, you work away from the lamina because you can quick some of them with that tool cleaning out fungus tracks.
This looks like something I was watching a movie. Oh, it was Mayor of Kingston, the prison movie. And it looked like this was in a couple of the prison scenes where the guys got shanked.
Well, it probably would work for that. I've not done prison to try that out.
We don't want to
on it.
No, we don't. All right, guys, stick around. We got a big show to get into, and when we come back, we'll talk about abscesses and how to manage them and how to prevent them and what causes them as well. Stick around. You're listening to Equine Dynamics with Mike Stine. Welcome back to Equine Dynamics with Mike Stine. Don't forget, if you have any questions for Mike Stine, you can go to equinedynamics.com. Go to the email section. I think it's info@equinedynamics.com, and make sure you send him a picture. If you got a picture or something you want Mike Stine to talk about here on the podcast, or if you have any questions about anything in general about horses, he's a very knowledgeable guy. Email Mike Stine at the equinedynamics.com, and in the subject line, just put podcast. He's got a bunch of emails that come in, and this way it kind of deciphers your question from all the other problems and issues he's got going on. And over to my far right hand side is the one and only Mike Stine. How are you?
Hello, Travis. How are you?
I'm doing well. So did you lose power? You didn't lose power at all during this big storm that we have. Now, we broadcast in this studio, which is above our 3-car garage. It's a finished studio, and above our studio here, we have a big, huge, I forget what kind of tree it is, and it's full of icicles and branches and stuff. So if you listen closely as the wind blows, you'll hear a whole bunch of, sounds like reindeer on the roof.
Yeah, that's for sure.
Now, abscess on horses' feet. First of all, what is an actual abscess? I mean, when I think abscess, I think of like my tooth or a mole or something has gone bad and they have to go in there and cut my whole entire face open and rip it out. And, you know, you always hear horror stories about it. What's an abscess as far as when you're talking about horse feet, and what are the causes of it?
Abscess in the foot is a pus pocket in the foot.
Ugh. Does it stink?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
It can come from a bruise. It can come from something penetrating the hoof. Sometimes you get some little micro fractures, or you can get micro fractures around the edge of the perimeter of the coffin bone. And those little micro fractures, if you got a little chip in there, the abscess will clean that out. There's a number of reasons you can get. There's probably a whole list of internal reasons that you can develop into an abscess. Laminitic horses, cushianoid horses, thin-soled horses are more prone to it than one with a big, heavy foot. We've had a couple here recently that turned into something much more than an abscess. Had one we just worked on at the clinic that had a growth up the hoof wall where we had to remove part of the hoof wall. Actually, I've had 2 of them that have gone to surgery. One of them had some problems in the bone, a little bit of infected area in the bone, sequestrum kind of thing, and they cleaned that out, but was continuing to abscess over and over and over and kept blowing down the same track. So if you got these repeated abscesses in the same area, sometimes you need to look a little closer and say, oh, it's just an abscess, because there can be other things going on internally that we need to take care of. As far as managing them, we've done a lot of things over the years. Sugardyne is an old classic. Sugar and your iodine mix up a paste. You got the little pads that you can soak and put on. That's probably better around the coronary band. The animal intex pads, Epsom salt paste of different sorts.
So even with regular maintenance on like for you that comes out to our property, even with regular maintenance on a horse's foot, you'll still, I guess, get an abscess?
Occasionally you can, yes. That does happen. If you end up with a pressure under a shoe, if you end up with a problem with a nail, if you end up with a puncture in the foot. I had one that I was asked to look at here recently where there was a nail the horse had picked up right in the center of the toe that ran up behind the hoof wall somewhere. And it was kind of interesting because the owner says she's been getting lamer and lamer, and we've cleaned the foot out. We've looked, we can't see anything. I'm like, there's a nail head sticking out there, and it's not supposed to be. So you kind of wonder sometimes. It does not have to be the end of the world. Sometimes they look like their leg's broken. You need to get your farrier and vet involved. Some of them are hard to find. You can, if you've got a pocket in there developing, it can be seen on a radiograph. And every state's got different rules at this point. A lot of states' farriers will use hoof testers, some states not. I know with FEI horses, the whole ruling on what farriers they can and can't do, they've had some updates on that. But if someone is to use hoof testers, be very gentle and very careful with them, because you're not trying to hurt them with the hoof testers, because you can. Kind of like putting your finger in the nutcracker you crack walnuts with and cranking down on if you want to get carried away.
So what are the top things that you can do to actually prevent this?
Regular maintenance, the environment the horse lives in. We get more of them during wet weather. When you get frozen ground, it's mud and it clumps up, and you bruise up the foot on that sort of thing, you can end up with some from bruises turning into an abscess to clean the damaged tissue out.
So from riding or just walking in the pasture or just being free in the pasture, it could happen at any time. So
sometimes it can happen because they're a horse.
It's like little baby kids walking around. How do he hit his head? I don't know. He's a kid. He's got a big head on his body.
That's right. Runs into something.
Right.
But no, the better the living environment is, probably less chance of it. If you got a horse that's living in swamp, you're more chance for bacteria to get in and all that. If you got a laminitic horses, the lamina has been stretched and damaged. You also have horses in that kind of condition, or thin sole horses, where if I got a sole that is really thick, they could probably jump on a few rocks and not bother. But I have horses out there that, when I get called in, have very thin soles, and I can get a reaction with my hand pressing with my thumb. I can flex that sole. Those horses, it's not going to take much. So we need to look at doing something to toughen up soles, and also look at how and what we're doing with their feet, because if the mechanics, the ratios of the foot are incorrect, if you've got the lever point pulled too far forward on the foot, as far as your breakover, and the support not in the back place, you're compressing that coffin bone inside against the sole corium harder. The sole corium is the live area between the coffin bone and the hard part of the sole, the horn wall of the sole. And you start compressing that area, well, it starts getting a little harder to get blood flow in there. If you limit blood flow, they don't grow foot.
Yeah.
If you get the mechanics better on the foot, it's much easier for them to grow sole mass.
All right, we're going to take a quick little break, and we're going to come back and talk about a little bit of how to manage it, and also talk about quarter cracks. Stick around. You're looking to Equine Dynamics with Mike Stine. He'll be right back. Welcome back to Equine Dynamics with Mike Stine, the best podcast to create sounder horses from the ground up. Over to my far right-hand side is Mike Stine.
Good morning, Travis.
And the roads out there are slowly thawing out there from this big snow, sleet, rainstorm that we've been having here. Now, we broadcast just outside of Charlotte, North Carolina. And if you have any questions for Mike Stine, go to equinedynamics.com. There's a little section down at the bottom that says info. Just click on that. Send them an email. If you have any questions, we'll answer on the very next podcast. If you have pictures or something you want to take about your horse's feet, or if you just want to share it in general here at the podcast, we'll show it on the video as well. And you can also see this video to go to Equine Dynamics on your YouTube. They got their own channel over there. Mike shows, he's got some videos of him like shoeing horses at actual barns and stuff, and he kind of does a little how-to and school and what to look for. So everything that you hear here on the podcast, you can also see he makes videos as well on his YouTube channel as well. What?
We're working on a list of videos that need to be made.
So if you were to do like the stuff that we're talking about here's an idea. I'm just throwing it out there. Well, you can take and run with it. So for example, we're talking about quarter cracks and something like that, and you come across a quarter crack actually out there on the field, I would do a video of that, show it, whether it's a 5-minute video, 3-minute video, whatever it is, and then that way you have a little bit more association, and people go, oh, that's what a quarter crack is, or that's what an abscess is.
Right.
Now, we're talking about abscess and managing it. So what's the best way to manage it? You were talking about cleaning it out and soaking it in vinegar or baking soda and all that stuff. The best way to manage it, can you ride a horse that's got an abscess on it? How long should you wait? I guess this depends on how bad it is and how often or how quickly is the recovery for anyone that has an abscess.
Well, vinegar and baking soda is going to make for a fizzy foot. I would look more like Epsom salt paste or something. And call your vet, call your farrier. get your professionals involved if you need a little help. As far as riding them, that's kind of up to the horse. It's not like a broken leg. Sometimes people think their horse's leg is broken, but they'll do what they feel like doing. I'm not completely opposed to them moving around a little bit because, once it starts draining, movement helps push the pus and water all out of the foot.
Keeps the blood flowing, too.
Keeps the blood flowing. As far as managing it, opening up sometimes, if I can find a track that I can work a little bit in the foot and get to start seeping through, we'll get some results. I've learned over the years, seems like back when I was a kid, the thing was cut a hole in the bottom of their foot the size of a 50-cent piece, always over the abscess. But then he can't walk for the next few months for the damage we did to the foot trying to get to the abscess. Be careful with what is done. If they're opening up a hole the size of the Grand Canyon in the horse's foot, well, may have been better off leaving it alone. And also, I learned this dealing with competition horses, trying to keep them in work. If it's something that's close to the hoof wall, if I can go through an area, like punch a little hole in the hoof wall, carve a hole down at the bottom edge. If I can get a little drainage there, sometimes I can do it without ever popping a shoe off. And the reason for doing that is to get them back to work quicker. And even on a barefoot horse, if I can go through the wall. Now, people see a horse standing on the foot and they see a notch cut in the wall. They're like, oh, my God, look at his foot. But it's a lot safer for the horse to get the drain through the wall. If I can get it to come out without blowing out the coronary band, blowing big tracks up the coronary band, get it to come out there. Then going in through the sole and digging a large crater in the sole that has to be padded, has to be maintained. Because if I can get it to come out through the wall itself, A, I can leave the shoe attached if the horse is shot a lot of the times. B, there's less damage. You don't have to pad a horse, and you would rather not if you would have to do that as far as putting like leather pads or whatever under the foot. If you got a horse you want to keep a foot open, you keep it open.
Now, is there any like oral stuff? Is there antibiotics? Is there shots or anything that goes along with managing once you've cleaned it out and stuff? Is there anything that the horse has to take medicine-wise? When you have a tooth pulled, an abscess tooth, they always give you like antibiotics and stuff to fight off any kind of infection. Do horses or anything have anything like that or injections?
Yes, they do. And, that's one of those deals you need to get in touch with your vet and talk to your vet and deal with that end of it. My part is the hoof capsule itself. There are some of the antibiotics do not work well in the hoof caps, in the hoof itself because of circulation and what works where. And that's where your vet, you use your professionals to see if they think you need to put the horse on an antibiotic, and then you do as they do. These really big ones and these reoccurring ones, yes, you definitely need to get a vet involved in that. I have areas where I find abscesses that people don't even know about, and we'll do some videos on how to check out a foot.
Now, quarter cracks. What are quarter cracks? Because to me, it sounds like a street terminology in the various places. What is a quarter crack?
Well, a quarter crack itself is true quarter cracks will start at the coronary band down in the quarter of the foot. The area quarter is basically in the middle part of the foot,
okay,
middle to the back. And if you have heels and the back of the foot's not prepared and they're collapsing forward, it bows the coronary band up. And after a while, if you bow hard enough, you can get it to split.
Mike's over here doing hand signals and stuff. And we're going to work in, he's going to bring in some samples of actual things. You've got a couple bones, like leg bones and stuff at your house there?
I do have some leg bones.
So eventually he'll bring them in, and as he's talking about, he won't be pantomiming with his hands. And you can see Mike pantomime. Go over to YouTube and search for Equine Dynamics. Make sure you subscribe.
If you tie my hands together, I can't talk.
And make sure you subscribe to his channel as well. So quarter cracks is, like you said, halfway through the foot.
There's a lot of stress on the coronary band because the heel's folding under. It will split. Now, I have some little chips at the bottom. People call any cracks a quarter crack. Well, that's not completely true. So it's location of the foot. We'll get into at some point how to deal with quarter cracks, and it doesn't have to be made into a monster to deal with.
Is it life-threatening? Could it lame a horse? I mean, what if quarter cracks are left unkept or unfound or discovered? What could happen to the actual horse? I mean, everything sounds bad for me. Everything sounds bad. If it's got abscess, quarter cracks, heel erosion, all the other stuff we've talked about in the last couple podcasts, everything sounds bad. So if quarter cracks are left untaken care of, what happens?
Well, some of the worst ones you can get some really lame horses. Some of them, because of damaged tissue under that, can blow some abscesses. Typically, if you catch it early on, you don't have a lame horse, you readdress what you're doing and move forward with it. You know, they don't have to be a big deal. If you've got someone managing your horse's feet well, you make the adjustments you need to make and move on. Some of the more severe ones we have to get a little creative with.
Now, what's more common, abscesses or quarter cracks?
There again, fiddle the situation.
Yeah.
You know,
well, what do you see in your line of work? I mean, your line of work.
I see.
What do you see most right now? And is it a year or a certain time during the year? Is it January you see the abscesses and the summertime you see quarter cracks?
Well, the quarter cracks are, to me, how you're managing the back half of the foot, and that's going to depend on the farrier. I get called in on quarter cracks, dealing in the vet clinics to work with, and I like to say on my horses we don't have any unless I inherited them. I've got a few that are a mild problem, but they've also got scarring in the coronary band where those type of things will open up a little easier. But it's a management thing. Abscesses, it depends on the time of the year. It depends on the horses. I do not deal with as many laminitic horses as I used to. When I was dealing with laminitic horses constantly, yes, we saw a lot of abscessing.
So it's not a seasonal thing like, oh, don't forget it's August. Well, keep an eye on your quarter cracks, or it's the rainy season. Keep an eye on your abscesses.
Well, it can be because hooves in different environments will react different.
Well, let's talk about the horses here in North Carolina. That's all we care about right now. Let me be a little bit more specific. My horse here in North Carolina.
Your horse here in North Carolina. Your horse here in North Carolina, hey, she has a good solid foot.
Okay, good.
She's not going to have crack problems that easy because it's got a good, fairly heavy hoof wall. It's pliable. It's got a good bit of strength to it.
Okay.
Now, there are horses out there with a relatively brittle hoof wall and thin hoof walls. Thin hoof walls crack easier. Brittle hoof walls crack easier. I don't think that we can paint a foot on a horse. There are things we can do to help, but some of it's genetic, some of it is feeding your horse. Horses on better feed programs tend to have better feet. It's like, do you grow good fingernails and hair or not?
Well, I kind of do.
Well,
more than I'd like to admit. All right, when we come back, we'll take one more last little quick break, and we'll get into saddle interference and the movement of an equine horse if you have a wrong-fitting saddle. Stick around. You're listening to Equine Dynamics with Mike Stine. I'll be right back. Welcome back to Equine Dynamics with Mike Stine, creating sounder horses from the ground up. For any information that you want to have or any questions you might need, email Mike Stine by going to equinedynamics.com. Make sure you follow his YouTube channel as well on Equine Dynamics on YouTube. Make sure you like, subscribe. He's going to get a whole bunch of videos lined up, all the stuff that we talk about here on the show. Now, one thing, I pulled this article. I thought it was very interesting. Popular culture depicts medieval horses as majestic creatures, tall and muscular and powerful with big shining knights on it. But now researchers have shown that horses in the Middle Ages were more likely smaller than what we have here in present day. A team of zoo archaeologists, made up word, in the United Kingdom analyzed about 2,000 horses' bones for 171 different archaeological sites dating between 300 and 1650 CE, which is, it's a long story. The horses in the Middle Ages they found were much slighter than the modern day horses, almost usually close to pony size. Normal horses, to be called a horse, it's over 14.2 hands or something like that?
Yes, that would be a horse.
The horses that they're finding in the medieval times are actually smaller than 14.2 hands, which is like 4 foot 10 inches. They're finding the actual, the movies got it wrong. It's not these big, huge, majestic 17-hand horses. They're actually small, like little ponies that they ran, which is kind of funny to see a guy in a shining armor riding like my little miniature ponies out there to joust.
Well, it's kind of like those pickup trucks. You see a man's working truck, and then you see the one that sits up 4 or 5 feet off the ground with tractor tires on it.
All right, saddle interference with equine movement. We were talking about flocking earlier before the show, and you were saying that there's a difference between flocking and adding flocking, and a lot of times people don't need to add flocking to the saddle. Run over that whole conversation that we had.
I just had a little situation where I was asked to look at a saddle, and you understand I'm a farrier. My best buddy for many years fit saddles, and I got involved in measuring trees for him because he was out of the country and doing some custom builds and involved in that sort of deal. And also he had me doing a little bit of flocking with him. But in that, turn the saddle upside down. The saddle had been freshly flocked. Horse wasn't going as good. But what looked like to me it happens where the access holes were, we're kind of dumping the flocking off at that point because there was a bulge at each access hole where flocking had been built up, and it was not pushed through the saddle. Now, working with Ray, what he would do is slide his flocking in behind the flocking and push it out off of the tree itself. and then take his palm mallet to it and kind of fluff it up before you ever flock the saddle and decided if you needed to. If you felt lumps in there, I built a little tool for him that you could slide in there and turn it over and hook little bits and bring it out.
Mike, you build a lot of tools, Mike. You should go into business and just buy building tools.
Well, somebody's got to do it. He had something that he wanted, and he had a design in his head, so we did, because you can.
Right.
So the horse was moving better before the saddle was flocked. It's like I told her, it may have been better off just fluffing out the flocking before we added in any, and that's something that needs to be paid attention to. So flip your saddles upside down, and you can feel with your hands on these English saddles, you can feel bulges, lumps, holes in the flocking, and everything else. And you can also feel if the flocking has gotten hard. When you're flocking a saddle, if all you do is add flocking in, you've only got so much room in there. You put flocking in, it flattens down. You put flocking in, it flattens down. You put flocking in, it flattens down. The more of it you get in there, the firmer it will get overall. Eventually you make a baseball, and then you have to strip it all back out. But if you can fluff it up, you can make that flocking grow, like we were talking about your baking situation.
Yeah, if you want to get more air in your bread, you knead your dough over and over, and it makes the dough kind of more fluffier, rather than just putting dough on top of dough and thinking you're going to get a bigger loaf of bread.
Right. So that's something that needs to be thought about with these saddles. I've seen people work on a saddle with a rubber mallet like you might use in a shop for beating on something that you don't want to tear up. But pay attention to what's going on. Fill your saddles. Check for wet spots under the saddle or dry spots. This horse had some definite spots where it quickly showed in the hair where you had some rubbing and pressure. It showed you exactly where those lumps were in the saddle.
So it was basically rubbing the hair off of in this situation, the hair was being rubbed off the horse where these, what you call quote unquote baseballs that were rubbing on the saddle on the horse's fur. So it's the equivalent of like you wear socks all day long, you don't have hair on your ankles because the socks rubs your hair off.
Well, if you put pressure on a lump in the horse's back, it'll rub. You see this horse with white spots on their backs. That's probably from saddles. It might be from their buddy out in the field biting them, but if you continually work on that area, you damage the hair follicles and you'll get white hair that comes out.
Are flockers registered or anything like that? Do they have to follow a certain thing, or is it based on the vendor? So a vendor, ABC Saddle, shows the person how to flock an ABC saddle for whatever person that buys ABC Saddle from them. So is it a lesson certification, kind of like you yourself, you've got all this training, all this stuff behind it. Flocking, is it on a company basis, I guess, how they want to train them? Because you said something like some flockers only get like 2 days training, paid training. Come work for us, we'll pay you for training, and then you can flock our horses, and you're a professional now.
No, I've talked to some that have had very little training. I've know some that have had some very extensive training, and not to say anything about people being less experienced, but what I knew and could feel on a horse 20 years ago is not what I know and can feel about a horse now. So if you're working with somebody who is experienced long enough to learn where their mistakes were made is a big plus. I don't know what kind of training is there for saddle flockers. Everything that I did flocking saddles was with Ray Morris from New Zealand, and he taught a lot of people. Ray worked under Horseback Basics of New Zealand, and his saddle company for custom working saddles was Ramosa Saddlery. I spent a lot of time with Ray, and I'm not out flocking people's saddles. I was learning from him because I need to know what's going on when I can't get a horse moving. So I need to be able to check it out, and I need to be able to ask somebody to look, let's go in a direction, let's take a look at it.
So a situation would be, you've done the shoe adjustment and you're looking and the horse still isn't right. You will physically take the saddle off, flip it upside down, look at the horse. I assume that the saddle's not on the horse when you're shoeing it, or is it?
No. We'll pull the saddle out with no pads or anything under it. Put it on the horse, flip the saddle upside down, take a look at the saddle. With Western saddles, you can make adjustments with pads, but you need a big enough saddle to have room for it. If you got a saddle that's too tight and you got an A-frame, you end up sitting up on the points of the tree. Well, think about, do you ever done any backpacking?
I have, yes.
You ever tried to backpack with a bad backpack that's biting you in the back?
Yeah, through school, yeah. Backpack. I carried all my books in elementary school because I didn't want to go to my locker. Junior high. I didn't want to go to my locker, so I carried all 7 courses in my backpack. And yeah, the backpack itself would stick me in my arms and stick me in the wrong places. I didn't like it, but I had to do it. I was tough.
Okay, well, it's no different with the horse. If you're go out and jog a mile with that that backpack on, you wouldn't have moved as well. If you had a comfortable backpack, you would have probably moved better. Probably wouldn't have jogged a mile, but we ask horses to jog whatever, jump, everything else with the backpack on.
So if it's not sitting right, it's going to irritate the horse.
Right.
All right, guys, what did we learn today? Abscesses, causes, preventing, and managing?
Yes. Take care of your abscesses. Get your professionals involved. They don't have to be the end of the world. If you got something that is just really out of hand, really big, you really need to call the vet and have them take a look at it. We can see gas pockets on x-rays. I'm very pro working with vets. I've learned they need to be my best friend over the years.
Quarter cracks?
Quarter cracks is a lot of management of the back of the foot. Once you get quarter cracks, there are a lot of different ways you can go at it. Living conditions make a big difference. Work of the horse makes a difference. And if you catch them early on, a farrier can rectify the situation with just an adjustment of how he's working.
And one of the advantages of working with Mike Stine, he's somewhat knowledgeable as far as the way horses' saddles need to be flocked. So if your farrier out there is not helping you build a sounder horse from the ground up, requirement is kind of a bonus.
Most farriers are not going to be exposed to that. If it hadn't been for myself getting involved with Ray back at Equitana, I knew saddles were a problem and could be a big problem.
You just didn't know at the time how to adjust those problems or what to look for.
I had no idea, but Ray and myself did a good run of clinics together. We consulted back and forth for a good many years, so we did a lot of note comparing, and we were coming from opposite parts of the horse running into the exact same thing. And problems with feet, if the mechanics are not right on the ground and it locks up the shoulder, pushes the pelvis out behind it, all that, it's hard for him to get a back right. If you got a saddle that's biting them in the back, causing them to clap their back, causing them to lock their shoulders, improper placement on the saddle, well, I can't get their feet right because you'd end up with mechanical forces coming from the other end. And just like your backpack, if you loaded your backpack one-sided with the books, think about what that'd do to you.
I did that many times.
And and that's where our riding instructors come in, and the rider, if we can't get the load centered up and moving freely with the saddle, well, guess what? There you go again.
All right, guys, if you have any questions for Mike Stine, feel free to email him. Go to equinedynamics.com. Send him an email. Make sure in that subject line you put podcast so it comes directly to Mike and he can decipher between all the other emails that he gets. Any questions, any pictures you want to send to Mike, you can do it there. If you want to watch this video for every podcast we do, we have a matching video as well. It's available on the Equine Dynamics YouTube channel. Make sure you see that. Mike Stine's going to also create some videos that we've been talking about here on the podcast, and you can see it as he's doing them, another reference points. If there's any subjects you guys would like Mike Stine to talk about as well, make sure you email him as well. On behalf of myself, my name is Travis Holmes. That is Mike Stine over to my far right hand side saying good night.
Good night. Y'all have a good evening and day or whatever time it is for you.
And we'll see you next week. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Dream on.